All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Good morning. My name is Aoife Delargy. I'm the Vice President of Law School Engagement and Advocacy at Equal Justice Works. Today, we are going to give you an update on public service loan forgiveness. This session is going to run from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern. It is being recorded. If you need closed captioning, please press the button below. We do have closed captioning available as well as an ASL interpreter here today. Thank you, Debbie. Just so you know, if you'd like to enter any questions in the chat, please feel free to do so. We will answer them during the Q&A question section at the end. If you'd like to ask a question privately, please send it to my colleague, Sarah Lackeritz, who is here today to assist you. Also, if you're having any tech issues, please feel free to message her. I'm now going to hand it over to our moderator and panelist, Monica Konaté. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining this panel on the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. As Aoife said, my name is Monica Konaté. I am the Senior Policy Associate at AccessLex Institute, and I'll be moderating this session. I am joined today by Heather. I'm joined today by Heather Jarvis, a student debt expert who has contributed to the student debt relief policy for the House Education Committee and others in Congress. Heather has dedicated her professional efforts to advancing public service loan forgiveness, which allows recent graduates to dedicate their careers to the greater good. Heather leads efforts to establish and expand student debt relief programs and to inform borrowers, schools, and employers about how to benefit from available debt relief programs. I'm also joined by Frank Russo, the Director of Government and Legislative Affairs at the National District Attorneys Association. Prior to joining NDAA, Frank worked on Capitol Hill as a law clerk with both the U.S. Senate Committee on Judiciary and the U.S. House Judiciary Committee on the Subcommittee for Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. He is a graduate of the Catholic University of America, Columbia School of Law in Washington, D.C., where he currently serves as the school's alumni council, serves on the school's alumni council and received his bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia. I'm also joined by Michael O'Neill, a legislative counsel at the American Bar Association who handles several federal policy issues, including those related to assisting student loan borrowers through programs such as the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Lastly, but certainly not least, I'm joined by Aoife Delargy Lowe. So the goal of today's panel is to provide you with information about the PSLF program and how it can be used as a valuable recruitment and retention tool for organizations like yours. We will also provide you with information regarding the recent announcement from the Department of Education on the updates to the PSLF program. Lastly, we'll outline with the work of the PSLF Coalition and how public interest employers can get involved. It's our hope that you'll take this information you learned today and spread the word to as many employees as possible about the program and about the newly announced temporary waiver. So let's hand it over to Heather to provide a high-level introduction of PSLF and to provide an update on the recent announcement from the Department of Education regarding the temporary waiver.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. So public service loan forgiveness was established in 2007 and is meant to assist public interest employers in recruiting and retaining indebted staff members. It has largely not met its promise thus far because of overly complicated requirements that were not well communicated to the loan servicing companies or borrowers who have tried to benefit. Very exciting news is that President Biden and Secretary of the Department of Education have announced a time-limited waiver of certain requirements of public service loan forgiveness. And so what this means is that people working with you at your organizations who previously thought that they would not qualify or had been told that they had the wrong kind of loans or that their payments did not count towards the 120 required, now have an opportunity to progress toward forgiveness or even receive full loan cancellation after a recount of their qualifying payments. So let me give you just a brief description of how public service loan forgiveness has been supposed to work. For years, I've been saying to audiences public service loan forgiveness is earned by borrowers who are working full-time in public service positions, and it's earned by making 120 qualifying payments. And qualifying payments is a term that has a lot of substance behind it. In previous days, for a payment to be qualifying, it had to be an on-time payment of the full amount due on a federal direct loan while enrolled in an income-driven repayment option. It had to be not more or less than the amount due. It had to be not early or late. It had to be not on the wrong kind of loan. And many folks have been tripped up by these requirements that are many. And so the exciting thing is that the Department of Education correct these issues by waiving the requirements that have been so difficult to meet. So most importantly, the requirements that have been waived are the requirement that a borrower has a specific kind of loan, the right kind of loan. And so the folks who will benefit the most from this waiver are those of us who have older federal student loans. More recent graduates are more likely to have already had direct loans. Direct loans have been the only loans issued for since the summer of 2010. But it's your more experienced attorneys who have previously been told they have the wrong kind of loans who may now qualify. And so what do people need to do? What they need to do is file an employment certification form, now known as a public service loan forgiveness form. These are available at studentaid.gov. And I encourage you to let everyone who works with you know that if they have student loans and you are a qualifying employer, they should certify all of their public service employment that has occurred since October 1st, 2007. Similarly, people with older federal loans may need to consolidate those loans in order to make them into direct loans, which are eligible for forgiveness. Now, in the past, we may have advised some of these folks that it isn't worth consolidating or that they would lose credit towards a longer kind of forgiveness that doesn't rely on employment. But that information has changed. So just to emphasize, this is a new opportunity and it is limited in time. So people have a year to consolidate. It goes through October 31st, 2022. And so we have some time, but we don't have all the time in the world. But this is really, really thrilling. And the last thing I'd like to address before turning things over to Monica again to pitch things to the rest of our panel, who have many important things to say, is that the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is also subject to the negotiated rulemaking process that is currently taking place. I'm privileged to be able to serve as an advisor to that committee. I'm not a voting member of the negotiated rulemaking committee, but have been invited to advise them on the subject of public service loan forgiveness. So the Department of Education is undertaking a rule rewriting in order to improve access to public service loan forgiveness in the future. These rules will take effect potentially as soon as 2022, maybe as late as 2023. And our hope and intention is to allow for fewer hoops for borrowers to jump through and make it easier for them to jump through the hoops they must jump through. One thing we will not be able to do with the new regulations is include those older federal student loans in forgiveness. So this limited waiver opportunity is the best and only opportunity to get credit for payments made on those loans. The government really is limited in which loans they can forgive. They only own the direct loans. And so they require people to consolidate into direct loans to get the forgiveness. And that's important. So as public service employers who want to retain and recruit educated employees, I encourage you to take the opportunities we provide to educate yourselves and distribute the information we've provided to you so that your folks can benefit. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Monica, and I'll be happy to take questions when the time is right for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. That was really, really great information. It's good to see that the Department of Education is taking this so seriously and really trying to expand on eligibility. That's really great. Let's pivot a little to Frank and Michael to discuss how important PSLF can be as a tool of recruitment and retention.
Great, thank you, Monica, and I'll jump in, and then Michael, I know you have a lot to add. Really wanted to thank Equal Justice Works for having NDA. So just a little bit background on who we are. The National District Attorneys Association is the oldest and largest national organization representing state and local prosecutors in the country. We have over 5,000 members nationwide, and we're kind of recognized as the leading source of national expertise on the prosecution function, and I think that's what leads us here today. As has already been touched on and probably known by a lot of you here, prosecutors, public defenders, and our partners in the criminal justice system are facing challenges when it comes to recruiting, retention, and keeping that quality staff on board. And that's only been exacerbated by the pandemic we're currently living through, and through the challenges of student aid and the cost of student law school going up on a day-to-day basis. Driven by educational debt, attorneys interested in public interest law are often foregoing these opportunities, both on the front end and on the back end, to work in offices that have more lucrative private sector salaries, just to be blunt. And attorney shortages in these parts of the field result in overworked attorneys handling unmanageable caseloads, potentially and honestly affecting public safety, the administration of justice, and ultimately it concerns the public's confidence in the justice system. Student loan debt is our #1 cited overwhelming reason why attorneys either do not join our prosecutors' offices or leave those offices. And we've heard very similar things from our public defender friends. The vast majority of law students borrow to finance illegal education, and those rising costs have just created staggering debts that the salaries of these positions cannot compete with over the years. Well, that's kind of where the problem starts. So we were able to speak with some of our prosecutors in one office. 5 years ago, they had over 60 prosecutors in a major jurisdiction working with a combined experience level of over 500 years. Today, that office has just over 30 attorneys with 150 years of combined tenure in their office. The drop-off is almost staggering, and that's in a major city jurisdiction. This is happening in rural jurisdictions as well across the country. The average for prosecutors right now, salary-wise, is just over $65,000, and that's the median in large cities. So that number is going to get lower as you move into those rural jurisdictions. According to public data as well for our public defender partners, that number is 63,000, so it's even lower. So that kind of money is an outlier for the newcomers to this profession. You look at things like what do salaries look like in the private sector, it's easily upwards of 6 figures. So how are we going to be able to compete for the talent that needs to be used to create a confident and effective criminal justice system? Well, really, there's 2 avenues. One that we won't go too much into detail today is the John R. Justice Program, which is focused for prosecutors and public defenders. That's an important program that really takes a look at individuals who have been in offices for 3 years or longer and provides them with up to $10,000 a year in funding. It's a great choice, but really the key and the hook for hopefully your office, if you are in this public interest sector, is the public student loan forgiveness program. That full retrieval of student loan debt, that full removal, is the key to keeping some of those high experienced attorneys on your staff and keeping those individuals, as you know, if you work in the criminal justice system, you can handle the more complex cases. I will fully admit, a few years out of law school, I was not ready to handle a complex litigation or jurisdiction case. I am open to that, and I think a lot of you have experienced that in your offices. Those individuals who stay for 3, 4, 5 years are the ones who handle the complex murder trials, who handle the complex defense trials. And those individuals are needed in an office and are needed in our criminal justice system to ensure, as I kind of started with, that there is trust in that system. So we're very encouraged by what we're hearing about the PSLF program because it impacts a lot of those attorneys who may have been in your offices for years, and it may impact attorneys who are now in the private sector who you're recruiting to come into your office. So we're hopeful that this will be an effort that moves that ball forward, and we're really excited, and I'll end on this, to be part of that PSLF Coalition. This group of individuals really does, and organizations, makes a difference in the public interest law sector. I know law and criminal justice is just one piece of that, but it's an incredibly important piece of that. And it's really that this coalition, and if you would like to be a member, I know you'll hear more about it today, can really help us deliver that unified message to our lawmakers, our policymakers, and our leaders. So I'll stop there, Michael. I apologize for droning on and let you jump in.
No, but thanks for stealing most of my talking points and thunder there, Frank. Everybody, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. Obviously, this is a major issue for members of the American Bar Association. You know, the average law school graduate is now coming out with just law school debt alone of over $150,000. And I suggest you all read our Young Lawyers Division just recently published in partnership with AccessLex, a 2021 student loan debt survey. It's if I do say so myself, a very good report. It's easily readable and digestible. But, you know, a few big takeaways show that student loan debt has an overwhelming impact on a huge percentage of attorneys on their career choice. In addition, I mean, it has over 90% impact on some of their major life decisions, whether it's wanting to start a business or form a family, and you know, or even buy a home. So what ends up happening here is that, as Frank alluded to, is when you're facing this, well, what are your choices? You end up either or both going towards large urban centers, typically, and even more so than trying to concentrate into certain career professions. And what this does is essentially create a legal desert. And this is what you know, PSLF was in part designed across multiple professions, not even just the legal profession, to begin helping to address, so that you could actually get those public defenders or prosecutors into rural areas, or joining you know, a nonprofit that could help low-income Americans either with very critical legal services, such as, you know, seeking a restraining order against an abusive spouse, or seeking a child protective custody order. So for us, it's been very sad since its inception in 2007 that the PSLF program has been so plagued with problems, because when, you know, again, and these are law schools, so they're typically their counselors or mentors are fellow attorneys, couldn't advise students on whether a certain profession or career or position would be eligible. It meant that they forewent that, even if they had a true passion for public service or to serve these types of, you know, these types of communities. So we are very happy that the department finally, because it's the fourth administration since PSLF was initially formed, seems to be really grabbing the bull by the horns and tackling it.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Frank. I just wanted to add, what I'm also finding, and I also often see, is folks really just don't even know. I can't tell you how many folks I was telling about this panel to, and I would mention, oh, I'm doing a PSLF panel, and they were like, what's that? And these are not young kids. I won't age myself, but they're not young. And so I was really shocked. Many of them were working in the public service industry, and I was surprised that they weren't aware. So I think, in addition to people making decisions about not intentionally not getting into these professions, some folks just don't know that they can do this work while also addressing their student loans. And that's really, really important information. I don't see this in any job postings. I don't, for public service employers, I don't see this listed as a potential benefit. And I think if that were the case, people would start asking, well, what is PSLF? How can this help me? So I think there's a real gap there, and the real opportunity to come in and say, this is what we can provide for you, and this is how it can help you in your future. Thank you again, everyone. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that just goes right back to, you're exactly right, the mass confusion, because employers were unclear whether or not the position would actually qualify for it, or the paperwork would be so cumbersome that they just didn't want to do it. So again, the department's updated regs are very welcome.
Yeah, and I'll add, it needs to be used as a recruitment tool. That is the big piece here at the end of the day, is that they will need to be pushing folks into the profession, especially at the front end now, as we're seeing these caseloads grow.
100%. So that was really great. That was really lovely information, really, really insightful. Let's jump into talking about a little bit about what the PSLF Coalition and what they do and how you guys can be a part of that. Aoife, will you jump in and help us with that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Monica. So a little bit about the history of the PSLF Coalition that was previously referred to as the Coalition to Preserve Public Service Loan Forgiveness. So if that sounds familiar to you, it's the same thing. Essentially, this coalition was started in 2017, and Equal Justice Works was one of the leading organizers of the coalition. We have for decades as an organization been pretty aggressive in making sure that public interest lawyers know how to manage their student debt so that they actually can stay in this work. If this is the passion that they have for public service, we want to make sure that they understand that they're financially literate and that they can stay in this work long term. The program itself, started in 2007, so people weren't actually able to even apply for it until 2017, because as Heather stated earlier, you have to be in service for 10 years. In 2017, Equal Justice Works and other organizations came to realize that there could be a threat to the program, to it even before it got off the ground. So alongside other public service professional organizations, we united to create this coalition to make sure that our voices were heard collectively. We know that we're stronger together. It's social workers, it's teachers, it's nurses, and it's public interest lawyers. So we've been working very diligently to make sure that our lawmakers, throughout administrations as well, know that there are individuals relying on this program, that they have earned this, and that this promise cannot be broken. Right now, we're at a stage where we don't believe that we have to necessarily concern ourselves with preservation. We really applaud the Department of Education for these overhauls. We want to make sure everyone who is eligible for this temporary waiver knows about it. So we really need your help over the next year to make sure that as many people as possible know about this, that gets this waiver. In the future, that's our kind of front of mind priority as a coalition right now, make sure we get as many people under this waiver. The long term is that we want the next generation to be able to rely on this, that this is going to be easier for them, that there's going to be more transparency, and that we continue to work with administration after administration and our lawmakers to ensure that it becomes easier and it is more accessible. So a little bit about becoming a member of the coalition. If you are a leader of an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, we do not discriminate, and you want to become a member of the coalition, please let us know. There is no membership fee. We meet once a month with all of our allied members. We have over 90 now across sectors. We want you to be involved. We want you to be informed about what's going on and how you can help with this work. There is a Google form in the file section of this session that you can sign up if you are a leader of an organization. You can also email myself or Sarah Lackritz if you have any questions about getting your organization up on our website, our newly minted website. Sarah Lackritz will be delighted that I'm mentioning it, www.pslfcoalition.org. You can also follow us on Twitter at PreservePSLF. Our next coalition-wide meeting is on November 8th. We would love to see you there. I'm now going to hand it back to Monica for the Q&A section.
Thanks, everyone. This was a really great informative panel, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions that our attendees have. So I'm going to jump right in. And again, if you have questions that you'd feel more comfortable putting in the chat, go ahead and do that. I'm going to read those first, and then I'll open it up to anybody to unmute and go ahead and ask questions for themselves. So first question is for Heather. What about people who have been applying for TEPSLF and have been receiving the runaround for over a year? Do they need to submit anything new?
So the Temporary Expanded Public Service Loan Forgiveness, TEPSLF, is an opportunity to get credit for payments only that were not previously counted. So assuming that you have already certified all your employment, the Department of Education is telling us that TEPSLF applicants do not need to take any additional actions. But what every borrower should think about for his or herself is whether they have loans that were ineligible. So even if you apply for TEPSLF, you may have not thought you could get credit for payments on FEL loans. And so if you have FEL loans, you would need to consolidate those. And if you have not already certified all your employment, you would need to do that. Otherwise, the department tells us that the application you've filed for consideration will be sufficient. I encourage borrowers to watch their payment count at the Fed loan servicing site. The department tells us that that will be updated as they do these reviews. And if you don't see the credit you expect, then we have other opportunities for escalating. We can issue complaints through the federal student aid system, and we can involve the student loan ombudsman's office. And the ombudsman in this administration is inviting us to ask for assistance in navigating this system. So I think we may need to continue to agitate in order to have this waiver applied as broadly as it should be.
Thank you, Heather. So this question is for anyone on the panel. Should a person file the PSLF employment certification form before or after consolidating older federal loans?
I mean, I can jump in. I think, you know, it's not necessary that it be done in any particular order. You have to do both. So the department is saying consolidate first and then file the employment certifications, because you will need to have your entire period of employment certified and have a direct loan in order for the credit to be given. So consolidate first probably is what they're saying. I don't think it really matters. Consolidate, then file to certify your employment.
And another question, do law school employees qualify as public interest groups?
So the qualifying employment requirement hasn't changed regardless of this waiver, okay? So you do have to work at a government organization, federal or local or tribal to apply. And you also can work at a 501c3. You can be a member of the Peace Corps, or there is a handful of private organizations that essentially, you know, the government believe they're doing work that's important, that do qualify. If your law school is a 501c3, you may be eligible for public service loan forgiveness.
Monica, we have another question from the chat. Would folks need to consolidate before verifying employment? Heather, I'm not sure if you want to jump in on that one.
Oh yeah, so I think, you know, yes, I mean, I think so it's all right if you've already verified employment or you've filed those forms, you still can consolidate in order to get the older federal loans into the direct program so that they can be forgiven. But you do need to consolidate. So if you're just trying to decide what to do now, find out whether you have older federal student loans, do that at the studentaid.gov website. Then yes, file a consolidation application through the studentaid.gov website to consolidate those older federal student loans, and then ensure that you have certified all your employment. So file employment certification after consolidation.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any more questions on your end, Sarah? No? Okay. So if anybody wants to ask, we have another one in the chat. Sorry, just give me 1 second for the for the live questions. If an employee refinanced their student loans to a private lender, who would
How would they, I think it's how would they reconsolidate those loans?
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
How would they reconsolidate those loans?
Well, unfortunately, refinancing with a private lender is not reversible, and there is no way to make a private student loan into a forgivable federal student loan. So if people have refinanced into the private market, they will not be able to take advantage of this opportunity.
This is a really good question. Should we be worried about roadblocks to PSLF returning after the Biden administration ends?
Happy to.
I guess I was.
Oh, go ahead, Michael. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just be brief, Frank. I think that you wouldn't really have to worry about any legislation making its way through Congress, if that's what you're asking, what to wholly abolish the program. One nice thing about PSLF in these the wonderful times that we're living in, essentially doomsday or Armageddon, where we can't agree on naming post offices. PSLF actually is a rare bright spot that it has some bipartisan support and some very senior defenders and champions on the Republican side. So any legislative attempts, and hopefully I won't have to eat these words later on, I think that they would be doomed to failure at this point, because again, this is a wonderful recruitment tool for many areas, including rural areas that Republicans typically represent. So again, you actually have a swath of bipartisan support. Sorry, Frank, that was a little long.
No, it's fine. And we're even on stealing each other's talking points. So that was great, because I think it's really important. I think that one piece to pitch the coalition again is that's part of the work that we do is educating a lot of the new members and then the new administration folks. And I think that's incredibly important. It's one of those things that once folks hear about it, understand the actual benefits, we really do get a positive reception. Some exceptions, but they're few and far between. And then from the administration perspective, I mean, obviously, I think we've touched on the importance of paying attention to that PSLF program now. That may change, but from a broader perspective, the PSLF program has that broad and important bipartisan support. And the more that Congress hears about it, especially from practitioners, the more supportive they become every session.
Yeah, I'll just make a plug once again for the coalition. The ABA, we just at the end of the last week of September held a full week of advocacy on the issue of student loan debt, with one day actually just dedicated to PSLF. And I just want to thank all the coalition members. Ultimately, the department, I believe, received over 40,000 submissions and comments on the Department of Education on the importance of strengthening and reforming PSLF and certainly maintaining it. And in addition, we sent thousands of letters up to the Hill. So yes, it definitely has an impact. And thank you all again for the participating organizations who really helped champion and echo our message that week.
Thank you, Michael and Frank. Another question we have: I consolidated my loans in April. The loans are now being serviced by Nelnet rather than FedLoan. I just filed an employment verification and received a notice that the loans are under review. Does it matter who services the loans?
So no, it shouldn't matter who services the loans, although the filing of the employment certification is meant to trigger transfer of the loans to FedLoan. So the department sometimes states that borrowers who have filed public service loan forgiveness employment certifications have or will be transferred to FedLoan. That does not always happen exactly the way it is supposed to. But it shouldn't matter who your loan servicer is, although the processing of your certification of employment is meant to trigger you to go to FedLoan. So I think that's probably what is still in the works for the borrower who asked that question.
Another question.
If I just may, Heather, you could correct me, but the guest who asked about whether their employment at a law school would qualify, I believe that this is an issue that that we discussed about what positions or roles or institutions will qualify, that the department is still reviewing and is in the rulemaking process for. Isn't that correct?
So that's right, Michael, that the department is interested in more specifics about qualifying employment. With regard to law schools in particular, as Aoife said, the overwhelming majority of law schools are structured as 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So 501c3 employment always qualifies. There will be a lot of conversation in the negotiated rulemaking process about exactly how to define full-time. So we're interested, the committee is interested in including people like adjunct faculty, contingent faculty, who are not necessarily getting full credit for being full-time because of the way their employment contracts are structured. So, but when it comes to C3 employment, that's already part of the statute. So the expanding or the clarification of which employment qualifies will be more around the edges in terms of other nonprofits, such as C4s or C6s that may employ people who do public service work.
Any idea with respect to timeline of when people will start to receive decisions on their loan forgiveness applications?
I don't want to speak too much. If anyone else wants to chime in, please feel free. The department have said it will be, quote, several months. So it's going to be a long time. And I think that we don't necessarily need to be particularly patient. I do think we should give them, a couple of months to get going before we start being, super obnoxious about our follow-up. But I have already seen several borrowers have received notifications from FedLoan. So if you're already at FedLoan, people are getting emails that say, we are reviewing your case, and you may receive up to, they're already telling them, up to like 23 payments or this or that. So many people are already starting to see that kind of information. If you're not, it may be because they haven't gotten to you yet, or it may be because you have to take additional action, like filing an employment certification form or refiling one if you've filed one and not gotten an answer, or consolidating your loans. But we do have, we should watch this, we will watch this, and if 2022 starts to, move forward and there are folks that have not gotten the relief that they are entitled to, we may have to take additional action to sort of move things forward.
Mm-hmm. So Heather, FedLoan has said, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
FedLoan has said that they will no longer be extending their contract with the Department of Education. Could you talk a little bit about that? And also if you have any information on who will be servicing those loans in the future?
Sure. So I don't know that anyone has been given information yet about who will replace FedLoan. This rumor I hear is that maybe Mohila is one, but it's likely to be another one of the loan servicing companies. It's also apparent that although FedLoan has said they will no longer work in this area after the end of this calendar year, there is some sort of a transition agreement in place that I don't have all the details about. It certainly is going to be more than a year before FedLoan is absolutely gone. And as folks who are listening may know, Navient, one of the biggest servicers, has also now said that they will not be involved in loan servicing. And these are events that are significant, and they support our argument that it makes sense to be more liberal in loan cancellation and forgiveness. The system is already so bloated, it has a lot of difficulty accurately servicing the loans. And so the administration can make things easier for themselves by canceling loans that should have been canceled a long time ago. And they're doing that through several processes, both for public service loan forgiveness, but also there are many borrowers who were defrauded by their schools or who have been established their disability, who should have had their loans forgiven, and they're clearing out some of that volume from the system.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add on Heather's earlier point, obviously this announcement just came out on October 6th. So to her point, let's not be obnoxious, give them a beat to actually start the process. But later into the new year of 2022, we only have essentially upwards of 12 and a half months for people to get this waiver, the paperwork in for this waiver. So if people aren't hearing silence, we want the coalition, the coalition want to hear about that from everyone, to make sure that the information that we have is up to date and that we can advocate for you all. So please be in touch with us.
And I'll just very briefly, Heather, thank you for reminding me about the adjunct professor issue. And I'm going to throw this one into your lap more, Frank. But as you mentioned, certain DA offices could be very understaffed throughout the country, and they will often contract with attorneys to provide those critical public functions. And right now, there's large questions of a lot of these attorneys not qualifying, despite the fact that they're doing the same type of work. So that's these are other avenues similar to adjunct professors that should qualify, and we're looking to get those clarifications.
Yep, that was something I left out of my opening, which is that more and more in rural jurisdictions, you're seeing part-time prosecutors, meaning they have a full-time profession and assist in that capacity. We feel and have told the Department of Education strongly that those individuals need to qualify, or we'll lose them in those positions for similar reasons.
So we have another question. Oops, just lost that. Let me go up 1 second. So this information seems to be more relevant to us as existing attorneys. How can law school staff effectively use this information to help students who are concerned about their debt load?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at that, and anyone else can jump in. I mean, I think there are many law students that this is their second career. So keep in mind that they may already have student debt that is eligible for this, so keep that in mind. But I think law students should be well versed in understanding the nuances with this program, keep them informed of what's going on. But the hope is that with this advocacy work of the PSLF Coalition, that we are making strides to make sure that this is going to be easier for them, for the next generation, that it's going to be a more transparent process and more accessible. I'm thinking in my head of Heather's PowerPoint. She has a great graphic of a man having to jump through multiple hoops at the same time. Let's hope that that is not the case for future lawyers. Anyone else wants to jump in?
Something I'll add, and not to continue to put it on the experienced shoulders, but not just DAs, but anyone who's going to law schools for these type of career fairs, this is information that you can provide to the students and probably need to be doing. I wouldn't rely, I mean, the law schools do great work. I say that because Aoife worked at my law school, so I'll get in trouble if I say otherwise, but I will point out that I think students just in the swath of law school may not get this information. You can provide it to them, and that sometimes is something that is needed across the board.
One other point in that regard is that law schools should stay up to date on the information, because we are at a pivotal point in public service loan forgiveness. We're speaking today a lot about this temporary waiver that applies, yes, mostly to existing staff and those who have been employed for a period of time. I have, the rules as we've been describing them for years, but we're working on new regulations. And so this information will change, and it will be new, and you'll have previews from us as early as mid-December. We'll know, whether the negotiated rulemaking committee made consensus on the PSLF rules. If consensus was reached, then we'll basically know what those rules are going to be. If it wasn't, we'll still have a pretty good idea. So plan to update your internal communications and training so that you can give graduates and students the accurate information going forward that we're not quite able to give you today.
Good point, Heather. We have another question, a more technical question. I noticed that I can no longer locate just the standard PSLF employment certification form. I can only locate the form for PSLF and TEPSLF certification. If just submitting the form annually as advised by the program, would borrowers select the first checkbox of the form? Should I reread that question?
The form has been replaced. The old employment certification form has been replaced with a combined form. So the only form you find is the only form there is now. And it serves as both employment certification an application for forgiveness and an application for the temporary expanded forgiveness. So it's all combined in one form, which is supposed to be easier, but is actually rather confusing. So I'd have to look at the form to see what the first checkbox is, but I think that's the one that says, I just want to see if my employment qualifies. And that is if you haven't already reached 10 years of public service and you're not claiming you've made 120 payments, then that's the box you check.
Thank you. Is there a talking points memo we can use to speak to our job candidates? I'm with the public defender office.
Vikram, I think that the NLADA has definitely done a survey of public defenders on how this is a recruitment and retention tool. I would start there and take a look at that. In terms of a one-pager on explaining the public service loan forgiveness program, I would suggest going to our website, Equal Justice Works, and going to the Law Student tab to the Student Debt ebook. There, I jokingly say it's 70 pages of joy, don't read it all at once, but it does synthesize what you do need to know at a high level of essentially the ingredients of the program, so that you can be well versed in talking about it and that public defenders should be eligible for this program.
Thank you. And this last one is not a question, but a comment. There was a great segment on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago on the failure of PSLF highlighting JAG Corp's lawyers. Those stories about the broken promises is what motivated the Department of Education to fix the program retroactively and proactively. The person also added a link, so if anybody wants to take a look at that, it's in the group chat. So I will pivot now to live questions. Does anybody have any questions they want to unmute and ask?
Can you hear me, Monica?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you guys for answering. This topic is really important, and thank you a lot. A quick question that I have is there any, well, I actually have two, but one is there any interaction between PSLF and LRAP programs, meaning like, does participate in LRAP at your school in any way disqualify you for PSLF? And the second question is, in the temporary fix that they're doing, are we still bound by the rules that you couldn't have skipped a payment or made an extra payment or something like that?
I'm happy to answer the first question, Heather. I'm going to pivot the second one to you because I think you're better versed at that. But to answer your question about LRAP, and the student debt ebook on our website does actually walk through some hypotheticals of a public defender who's making $40,000 a year and is also availing of their LRAP while being enrolled in an income-driven repayment program. So in essence, you can be on track to earn public service loan forgiveness. So keep in mind, you're not actually applying for public service loan forgiveness until you've technically made the 120 payments. So you can be on track for that while also, receiving a loan repayment assistance program from your law school, from your student bar association, over those 10 years to make that monthly payment more, affordable for a public service employee. Heather, I'll pivot to you for the second one.
So yes, so just a little addendum to the first one, and then the second one is that most LRAPs are structured as forgivable loans so that the benefits are not taxable to the recipients under the Internal Revenue Code. If a program is not structured that way, as some employer-based programs are, it can result in taxable income, which can have the effect of raising student loan payments somewhat. And so it affects forgiveness in that way potentially, but it doesn't make you ineligible. Another question that Deborah has is also happens to be the case with a lot of LRAP payments. People had a problem with what we called paid ahead status. If a payment was made too early, then the loan was pushed into a status where no payment was due, and the servicers were not counting additional payments towards the 120. So that's one example of the many ways that people didn't get proper credit for the payments they made. And that is meant to be fixed by this temporary waiver. They're going to go back, they say, And what they're doing, to be clear, is they're not going back and re-looking at all those months and saying, well, it's Deborah's payment 5 minutes too late or early. They are just looking at the period of employment and saying, if you have shown us that you were working full-time in public service and your loans were in a repayment status, right? You weren't in default, and then you get credit for the time towards forgiveness, which, it has never been the way the program worked. I mean, the problem has always been figuring out what a payment is and getting credit for a payment. And so they've scrapped that and said, listen, if you've been in public service 10 years, you are going to get this forgiveness. The question is, how are we going to capture that? Because that's how it should be, right? It should be that you do public service, you get your forgiveness. But how are we going to capture that in the new regulations with the constraints that the statute gives us? And the statute says 120 payments, like it does. So, but I'm very creative and I'm advocating. And so unfortunately, I'm not in charge, but we're going to try to do the best we can with the new rules to make it, less cumbersome going forward.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, Deborah. Any more questions? All right, well, that was really great. That was so informative. Thank you. Oh, someone trying to speak? No, okay. I'd like to thank Aoife, Heather, Frank, Michael, and Sarah. Thank you so much for all the information. And thank you to the attendees for your really, really great questions. We hope that you are able, and you're getting a lot of praise from the comments. Thanks, everyone. We hope that this was informative and you learned a lot. And please do visit the PSLF Coalition website. Please do go out there and talk to your recruits about PSLF, talk to them about how important it is, and talk to them about how it could really benefit them in the future. If you have any questions after this, feel free to email Aoife. And otherwise, I'll hand it back over to you to close out today's session.
Thanks a million, Monica. Thank you for moderating. We really appreciate it. We love AccessLex Institute and all the work that you do. So thank you so much. Thank you for all joining. Thank you to our sponsors of this event, Idealist. It wouldn't be possible without them. Please join some of the sessions today. If you didn't get to watch any of the sessions yesterday, they are up now. You can watch them. They've been recorded. This is being recorded, so we will put it up publicly on our Eco Justice Works YouTube page at some point over the next few weeks. So if you want to share it, please do. Thank you again. Stay safe. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.